No honor is ever bestowed by the President of the United States that could mean more to someone than if the President calls you to the White House and gives you what he did to my guest, Dr. Damadian. Dr. Raymond Damadian was given the National Medal of Technology Award in a ceremony in the White House, and it was the beginning of the recognition that he's continuing to receive. There is the National Inventors Hall of Fame. Thomas Edison is in it, as is Eli Whitney, Samuel Morse, Orville and Wilbur Wright, Alexander Graham Bell, Cyrus McCormick, Henry Ford, Edwin Land, Igor Sikorsky, George Eastman, Charles Goodyear, and now Dr. Raymond Damadian. I'm profoundly impressed with him, especially as I read the story of his life in this book called A Machine Called Indomitable. Now, this book was published a few years ago, and I just ran into it this week. I haven't finished reading it, but it is a classic story of a classic possibility thinker who grabs hold of a dream while it's still impossible and refuses to let go. And that true power of possibility thinking that focuses on solutions to problems and inventing something new and creative and sensational. I don't think you can find that power so evident in any person who doesn't have a profound, deep spiritual faith. And Dr. Damadian does. He's accepted Jesus Christ as his personal Lord and Savior. He carries the entire Holy Bible with him in his coat pocket on a computer. I'll tell you, I urge you to go out and buy the book. The book is called A Machine Called Indomitable, and that's the name of the first MRI machine made and built. It's in the Smithsonian Institute today. I wish I had more time, but let's get started. You know, I've been reading about your corporation's Homer, I think. All of the firsts, my goodness, where are those papers? These 40 or 50 firsts. Does an inventor have a different kind of a mind fix?
Yeah, I suppose, out of sorts with everybody else.
I mean, first of all, you're a brilliantly well-educated medical doctor. And here you come up with the idea that what you were taught in medical school about the cell is wrong. And that everybody in this whole world in medicine and physiology has made a mistake in their analysis of the cell in the body. Now, that is a shocking concept to enter into the brain of an educated man. And you have proven that they were wrong, and the cell is something different than everybody had been taught that it was, right?
Yes.
Let me see. I've been in the machine. You call it the
MRI?
You, not in medicine, not in medical school, but you ran into an understanding that about 20 years before that moment, someone who discovered that every one of the atoms in the human body sends off a little, call it a radio signal. Billions of atoms in every body, right?
Yes.
The atoms of the nerves send different radio signals than the atoms of blood vessels.
Yes.
And those are different than the atoms of muscles.
Yes.
And that's different than the atoms of the joints. And bone different from cartilage. That true?
Yes.
When you hit that, you applied that to medicine. Thought if we could somehow make that work, we could see what's going on all through the body if we could pick up all of these different messages, right?
Yes.
Well, that's the basis of MRI. Is that correct?
Yes.
Sort of? I'm going to quit while I'm still passing. When did the idea really hit you?
Well, as you were saying, I was striking out on this new path on the physiology of the cell, and a colleague, Dr. Freeman Cope, called and asked if I'd like to take a moment to use this new technology, nuclear magnetic resonance, we otherwise called NMR, to try to prove some aspects of my theory. And he had the loan of a machine at a small company in the outskirts of Pittsburgh where we could do these experiments. Now, he wanted to measure by NMR potassium on the inside of tissue, but he was fearful that there wasn't enough normally abundant potassium on the inside of tissue, and I thought I might be able to help him make the experiment work because I knew of a bacteria that I could get from the Dead Sea with 20 times the normal complement of potassium. So we agreed, we went to do the experiment. I grew the bacteria, he ran this complicated machine, and
you put your stuff in the trunk of a car and had a lunch at a Holiday Inn coffee shop, and then you did your thing. It's amazing. You got to read the book, A Machine Called Indomitable. Fabulous. Got to make a movie on it. It's terrific. But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Well, we were successful. And the next morning when we were at the Holiday Inn, I said to Freeman, I said, this technology is astonishing. It's chemistry entirely by wireless electronics. You don't have to invade the sample. So if we could do what the chemist does on a small test tube of chloroform, we'd be able to go from one tissue to the next everywhere in the body and get the chemical analysis of the tissue, tell you whether something's benign or malignant, whether it's not as responding to drugs, and we should be able to spark an unprecedented revolution in medicine. Well, that was too much even for Freeman's fertile imagination, and he asked me how I'd go about it. He thought that 10 years before we'd convince anybody that we weren't bordering on the fringes of lunacy. And I went back to New York and grew up some rats with cancers in them because I thought the first way to be able to show this is to show that this radio signal in cancer tissue was different than the radio signal from normal tissue. And I drove back to the company and I proved that. I made the experiments with cancers put into tiny test tubes and normal tissue and showed that these radio signals were indeed different and that we now had radio signals as the first step that we could fashion scanners around to hunt down these radio signals to detect cancer. And that was the beginning of the MRI.
Oh, it's incredible. Wow. How many people here have ever had an MRI? I have. Wow. How many of these machines are there in the world today?
About 6,000 or 7,000 worldwide.
And where are we going with it? You're continuing to improve it almost on a month-by-month basis. Tell them what I saw in your place the other day.
Well, we have two things in focus that we want to change. One is that the MRI is too costly. We're not very happy that something that we've created, 90% of the world's population can't afford to get into, so we want to fix that. The scanners up until now have been selling for about $1.5 million, and it costs the average patient $1,000 for a scan, and that's too much. Next month, we will be announcing a new scanner that'll be available for the first time with more capability than the other scanners for $650,000, and I intend to get that lower, so that'll be step one. The other thing is that anybody who's had an MRI knows that it's not a pleasant process. People usually refer to it as the claustrophobic torpedo tube. So we've set about to make one that's open. And the new one that we have is open on 4 sides. And we've realized that that has allowed us to address another issue, which is we're very conscious of the fact that there is a rising need for a highly efficient detection technology for mammography. and that the existing technology, X-ray technology, isn't satisfactory. We believe that the MRI is the quintessence of a machine that will do that, but we have to solve the cost issue, because an X-ray mammogram costs $80 and an MRI $1,000. So with this new machine, because it's open on 4 sides, can be equipped with 4 beds, allowing the patient scanning couches to be preloaded so that we can sequence patients every 5 minutes, do 12 in an hour, and reduce the cost to about $80 a scan.
Wow.
And I think that the other attractive thing about it is that it eliminates the indignities that ladies have to go through with private parts having to be handled, because they don't have to have the breast compressed between steel plates, first one and then the other. They can just come in their street clothes and get up on the scanner and be scanned in 5 minutes without anybody attending to it.
I saw something that I couldn't believe. You said, look at that, and you had what I thought was a movie video on the screen. It looked like I was looking at the calf and the knee and the upper thigh, or the lower thigh of a human being. It was moving. Was that drawn by an artist?
No, with the new open scanner now, we can make movies, full-fledged movies of all the body parts. So you can see the knee in action, you can see the cervical spine in action, you can see the shoulder in action. And so you can judge function, which we couldn't do before.
And when I looked at it, you could see the difference between nerves and blood vessels and bones and cartilage and joints and muscle tissue and skin. I am so thankful to God for you. You know, you were picked by him. This is, I think, one of the greatest things to happen in the history of medicine. Probably the greatest thing ever to happen in the history of medicine. And God wanted to prove that he is still the ultimate scientist, and he picked a Christian like you. You got a word to tell the people about your faith? It kept you alive. Your partner committed suicide.
Well, Dr. Cope, who I'd done the original experiments with, the life of a scientist, particularly a pioneer, can be, like many other things in life, tough and painful, and a lot of toil. And Dr. Cope, even though he was a direct descendant of the Puritans who founded this country, didn't have the Lord. He had only the way of the world, which is a way of sorrow. And so we didn't have what the scriptures promised, where Jesus said that I have spoken that the joy I have may remain in you and that your life may be full of joy. And that's what sustained us through these trials, but Freeman didn't have that.
You became a Christian, committed your life to Christ in the Billy Graham Crusade in Madison Square Garden.
In the last row of the garden.
The
one I like to think that was closest to heaven.
Was that in 1957?
Yes.
Interesting, because I attended that crusade. I may have been there the same night, because I preached on that Sunday at the Marble Collegiate Church for Norman Peale. Wow. How old were you when you went forward at that Billy Graham crusade? A teenager?
20.
20. And you've lived by the faith, right?
Yes, sir. With some wanderings in between.
But you carry the whole Bible in here.
Well,
May I ask you to show them what you showed me downstairs? This man, you know, is the greatest honor, is the greatest technologist in this country. Show me the whole Bible.
Yeah, well,
Let's see the software.
Suppose I get you John 3:16 here, okay?
I know that by heart, so I can tell you if the computer is wrong. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. John 3:17. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. It's fantastic. Can you show us that little piece of software? That's it. The entire Holy Bible, Old Testament and New Testament. Hey.
Right where I need it.
Will the day come, do you think, yeah, over here. Will the day come, do you think, when X-rays are going to be a thing of the past?
We think so.
And on the table that you showed me, a surgeon can take the, what do you call it? That piece of
laparoscopy.
That laparoscopy
tools, yeah.
Just a little tick in here, and he enters the body with it. And he can be watching what's happening
on the screen.
So he can see, is it getting close to a blood vessel that he doesn't want to hit, right?
Yes. Yeah. He can perform surgery inside the MRI machine.
Surgery inside the MRI machine. That's the wave of the future. Thank you, Dr. Damadian. God bless you.